The autumn wind bit sharp across Havenbrook's downtown sidewalk, carrying the clink of wine glasses and low chatter spilling out from the bistro's glass-framed patio. Lila Marlow pulled her thin jacket tighter around her shoulders, her steps quick, eyes fixed on the crosswalk half a block ahead. She had stayed late covering extra shifts at the medical clinic, hoping the later hour would mean she could slip back to her apartment without running into Ethan. But luck had abandoned her tonight that he stepped out from between two parked cars right in her path, blocking her way. Ethan Hale's jaw was tight, his stare unblinking, the same heated look that had haunted her nightmares long after she ended their relationship. Panic coiled cold in Lila's chest. She had filed police reports before, yet nothing had fully stopped him from tracking her down, from showing up where she worked, lingering outside her building. There were no witnesses close enough right then. Most diners were seated on the other side of the bistro wall. Her phone sat buried deep inside her bag, too far to grab fast. "Thought you could just cut me off and disappear?" Ethan said, his voice dropping low, sharp with resentment. "You can't keep avoiding me, Lila. This isn't over." Every muscle in her body tensed. She glanced wildly over her shoulder, scanning the sidewalk for anyone, any stranger who might look like they belonged to her. That was when she spotted him. Kael Voss stood several feet away, broad-shouldered in a dark tailored coat, one hand loosely tucked into his trouser pocket. He was hard to miss, not just because of his striking features, but because of the quiet vacuum of space around him. Two men in plain dark suits hung back a short distance, unobtrusive but watchful, their gazes constantly sweeping the street. Black-tinted SUVs idled along the curb behind them, engines humming soft and low. Lila did not process any of those details in that split second. All she saw was a man who might plausibly be her boyfriend, if she sold the lie hard enough. Without thinking, driven purely by raw terror, she crossed the space between them in 2 fast strides. She looped both arms around his neck, tilted her face up, and pressed her mouth against his before he could react. Shock flickered across Kael's features for only a heartbeat. He did not push her away. Out of the corner of her eye, Lila saw Ethan freeze. His face flushed dark, a mixture of rage and disbelief washing over him as he watched the kiss. For several long seconds Lila held on, her heart hammering so loud she could hear it in her own ears. Then Ethan cursed under his breath. He shot them both one final venomous glare, spun around, and stormed off down the sidewalk, vanishing into the flow of pedestrian traffic. Lila pulled away at once, stumbling a small step backward. Her cheeks burned hot, embarrassment crashing over her now that the immediate threat was gone. She brushed stray strands of hair out of her face, her hands visibly trembling. "I am so sorry," she babbled, her voice shaky, repeating the apology again and again. "I had no other choice. That was my ex-boyfriend, he won't leave me alone. I needed him to think I was with someone. I can't believe I just did that to you. I'm truly sorry." As she rambled through her apologies, the world around her seemed to shift. She became aware of the heavy stillness. The 2 bodyguards had drifted closer. One of them, Rook, stared at her with flat, unreadable suspicion. No passers-by wandered near Kael. Pedestrians altered their paths without even seeming to realize they were doing it, giving the whole group a wide berth. The tinted windows of the SUVs glinted under streetlights. This was no ordinary commuter out for dinner. This was someone important, someone dangerous. Real dread replaced her earlier embarrassment. She had just grabbed and kissed one of the most feared men in the city on impulse. Kael's dark eyes studied her face, taking in her fear, her unsteady breathing, the way her shoulders shook. There was no anger in his expression, no outrage over her impulsive act. His voice was quiet, deep, cutting through the hum of city noise around them. "Since you chose me," he said steadily, holding her gaze so she could not look away, "I'll make sure no one ever hurts you again." Lila stood rooted to the concrete sidewalk, frozen. She had only wanted to scare off her abusive ex for one night. She had never expected to trade one threat for something entirely unknown. Somewhere behind her, one of the SUV doors clicked open. Rook shifted his weight, waiting for his boss's next order, and Lila understood in that moment. She could not simply walk away and pretend none of this had happened. Whatever she had started with one desperate kiss was only just beginning. Lila's boots tapped rapidly against the concrete as she turned and fled down the sidewalk, ignoring Kael's low voice when he called her name. Adrenaline still coursed through her veins, every nerve firing. She did not look back at the idling black SUVs or the broad-shouldered man standing beneath the street lamp. All she wanted was to put distance between herself and that strange, charged encounter, to get back to her cramped, familiar apartment and lock every door behind her. The echo of Kael's promise hung heavy in her mind, and it terrified her far more than Ethan's shouting had minutes before. By the time she reached her apartment building 3 blocks later, her hands still shook. She fumbled with her key ring, dropping her keys once on the concrete stoop before she managed to unlock the front entry door. Inside her small second-floor unit, she slid the deadbolt home, pushed a heavy dining chair up against it for extra weight, then leaned her back against the wood, gasping for breath. The warmth of her own walls should have felt like safety, yet she could not shake the feeling she was being watched. She kept replaying those final words, since you chose me, I'll make sure no one ever hurts you again. It did not sound like kindness. It sounded like a claim. That night she barely slept. Every creak in the hallway outside made her jump. The next morning she dragged herself to her shift at the medical clinic, dark circles prominent under her eyes. Mia noticed it the second Lila stepped behind the front desk. Her best friend leaned in while no patients were listening, brows drawn tight with worry. You look like you haven't closed your eyes in days. Did Ethan show up again? Mia murmured. Lila hesitated. Telling the full story meant unpacking the bizarre kiss, the bodyguards, the mysterious underworld figure she had thrown herself onto. It sounded absurd, like something out of a cheap thriller. She settled for a partial truth, describing Ethan cornering her downtown, leaving out Kael entirely. He found me last night. I got away, but I don't think he's giving up, Lila said quietly, typing patient information into the clinic computer while her stomach twisted. Mia's face paled. You should call the police again. Restraining order, follow-up report, something. This can't keep going on. Lila nodded, though hope was thin. She had already gone that route. Reports sat filed away, but Ethan still slipped through the cracks of the system. Mid-afternoon, her cell phone buzzed with an unknown number. Her heart skipped. She stepped into the empty break room and answered, holding the phone tight to her ear. Kael's deep voice rumbled through the speaker. You cannot keep running from this, Lila. Ethan will come for you again. He believes you are with me now, and that will only make his rage sharper. Panic flared. I never asked you for anything. That kiss was a lie, just a trick. It's over. Please leave me alone. Wishes do not erase what happened, Kael replied calmly. He knows my face now. He knows you were with me. That changes things. She ended the call without another word, fingers trembling, and blocked the number. But blocking a phone call would not erase the reality. When she finished work that evening, she scanned every face in the clinic parking lot, half expecting Ethan or one of Kael's men to be waiting. No one stood out. She hurried to her car, locked the doors, and drove home with constant glances in her rearview mirror. For a short stretch, she convinced herself she might actually return to normal. The illusion shattered when she reached her apartment stoop. Tucked halfway under her front door was a crumpled scrap of notebook paper. No envelope. Just raw, angry handwriting scrawled across it. Asterisk I saw who you were with. You think some rich guy can keep you mine? This isn't finished. Asterisk Lila's blood ran cold. Ethan had been here. He had come to her building while she was at work. He knew where she lived, and now he knew about the stranger from the bistro. She snatched the note, crumpling it in her fist, and backed several steps away from the door, afraid he might still be nearby, hiding in the shadows of the stairwell. Her phone vibrated once more. A text message, from a second unfamiliar number. No greeting. Only a single line. He was at your building. My people saw him leave. Lila stared down at the screen. Kael had known before she even found the note. He already had eyes on her apartment, whether she wanted them there or not. The safe, ordinary life she had fought so hard to rebuild after leaving Ethan was already cracking apart. The surface balance she clung to was gone. There was no going back to pretending none of it had ever happened. Standing on the dim landing, she realized with sinking certainty that she could not hide in her small apartment forever. Ethan's anger had a new target, and Kael's attention was fixed firmly on her. Whatever choice she made next, there would be a cost. Lila crumpled Ethan's threatening note tighter in her palm as she stared at the text glowing on her phone screen. Kael's warning hung over her like a heavy storm cloud. She hated that he already had surveillance watching her building, that he knew about Ethan's visit before she did. It felt like her private life had been pried open without consent. Even so, she could not ignore the cold truth. Ethan had been here. He had slipped into her apartment complex unseen, and next time he might not only leave a note. She stepped carefully to her front door, peering through the small peephole for long seconds. The stairwell landing stood empty, but every shadow looked menacing. She went back inside, rebarricaded the door with the dining chair, then sank onto her couch, mind racing. Accepting help from Kael meant stepping foot into his dangerous world. Rejecting it meant facing Ethan entirely on her own. Neither option felt like true safety. That evening, she called Mia, voice tight with suppressed fear. She finally told her best friend everything: the corner on the bistro sidewalk, the impulsive kiss, the bodyguards, Kael's quiet promise, and the text alert. Mia fell silent on the other end of the line for a beat. This man sounds unpredictable. Lila, what if he's just as controlling as Ethan, only with more power? Mia said, alarm sharp in every word. You can't trade one cage for another. Lila knew that fear all too well. It was exactly what gnawed at her. But Mia was right. There was no guarantee Kael's protection came without chains. After they hung up, Lila typed out a short message to Kael, her thumb hovering over send for minutes before she pressed it. Asterisk I will meet you. But I set the terms. No making decisions for me, asterisk he replied within minutes. Asterisk tomorrow evening. My penthouse lounge. Rook will meet you in the building lobby, asterisk the next day dragged by at the clinic. Lila could barely focus on patient paperwork. Every time the front door chimed open, her heart jolted, half convinced Ethan would walk through. When her shift ended, she drove across downtown toward the glass high-rise where Kael lived. The building loomed over the city streets, sleek and imposing. Rook waited inside the marble lobby, his expression neutral, no warmth in his gaze as he led her toward the private elevator. No other residents stepped onto their car. It whisked her straight to the top floor. Kael stood by floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the glittering Havenbrook skyline. The penthouse was spacious, minimalist, expensive, yet strangely impersonal, like a place for conducting business more than building a home. He turned when she entered. "Speak your terms," he said simply, folding his arms across his chest. "Temporary shelter only," Lila began, keeping her distance across the wide room. "I keep my job at the clinic. You do not get to dictate who I talk to or where I go. The second Ethan is no longer a threat to me, I walk out for good. This is not some arrangement where I belong to you." Kael studied her. He respected the boundaries she laid out, but he did not pretend there would be no price. "My men will guard the floor you stay on. You will have freedom within these walls, but outside this tower, danger follows you now, not only from Ethan. My enemies will learn your name eventually. That is the cost of being seen with me." His tone was flat, no sugarcoating. "I cannot shield you completely from every ripple this creates." Before Lila could respond, Rook's radio crackled to life. The bodyguard listened briefly, then turned sharply toward his boss. "Ethan is heading toward this building. He's in the parking garage, arguing with security. He's armed with a metal pipe." Lila's blood turned to ice. He had tracked her here. He had followed her car. All her careful terms felt fragile all at once. Kael's jaw hardened. He gave a short quiet order to Rook, who hurried out of the room. Minutes stretched, thick with tension. Lila stood frozen near the window, hearing distant raised voices from far below, muffled by heavy glass. Eventually Rook returned. Ethan had been detained by building security and Kael's men, removed from the garage before he could fight his way upward. He would be handed over to local police, along with the note Lila had kept as evidence. Even with Ethan in police custody for the moment, Lila understood the stakes. If she returned to her apartment tonight, he would be released quickly on bail, and he would come hunting again. The small safe world she had built was no longer viable. Reluctantly, she made her costly choice. "I'll take the temporary housing here," she said, voice small but steady. "But remember what I said. This is only for as long as I need safety." Kael nodded once. "You will have the guest suite on the secure floor. No one reaches that hallway without my authorization." Later that night, Lila carried only one packed duffel bag down the penthouse hallway to her new quarters. The corridor was quiet, watched by a posted guard at the end. Behind every locked door, behind every layer of security, she felt the weight of what she had agreed to. She had shifted from running from danger to actively defending herself, yet she had stepped deeper into Kael's shadow. There was no clean, easy exit waiting for her. She closed her guest suite door, turned the deadbolt, and leaned against it. Somewhere far in the building, an elevator chimed. She knew this was only a pause, not a resolution. Even locked behind reinforced walls, the real threats had not gone away. Days blurred together inside the high-rise tower. Lila kept her job at the clinic, commuting each morning with one of Kael's men trailing discreetly behind her sedan. She stuck strictly to her own guest suite, rarely wandering into Kael's main penthouse space. The arrangement followed the rules she had laid out, on the surface at least, yet she never shook the quiet feeling that she was being observed. Every closed-circuit camera in the hallways, every guard posted by the elevators, served as constant reminders she was living inside someone else's domain. Mia grew more unsettled with each phone call. Lila tried to paint the situation as a practical, short-term safety measure, but her best friend heard the unease underneath every word. One evening, Lila stepped out onto a small balcony off her suite, phone pressed to her ear, cool autumn wind stinging her cheeks. "You're living in a mob boss's building, Lila. No matter what boundaries you set, you cannot pretend this is normal," Mia said, her voice tight with frustration. "What happens when he decides your rules no longer suit him? You have no leverage here." "I still leave every day for work. I hold on to my own life," Lila argued, though doubt gnawed at her. She wanted to believe she retained control. "I haven't agreed to anything beyond temporary shelter." "Temporary has a way of turning permanent when powerful men are involved," Mia replied. Hurt edged her tone. "I hate that I can't even drop by to see you. I'm scared of drawing attention to myself just for being your friend." Those words landed heavy. A quiet rift opened between them. Lila ended the call with a hollow feeling in her chest. She understood Mia's fear, yet it stung to have her closest ally pull back. Back inside the suite, she paced across the carpet. She told herself she could keep Kael at arm's length, that this was merely protection on loan. But she could not know what would come next. Down the hallway, Rook crossed her path as she headed toward the shared kitchen area for bottled water. His gaze was sharp and untrusting. To him, Lila was an unplanned variable, a civilian woman who had blown into their world out of sheer panic. She represented risk to Kael's operation. "Ethan posted bail this afternoon," Rook said without preamble, stopping where the hallway lit by recessed lighting. "He's out again." Cops couldn't hold him long on the note and the garage disturbance. He's already active on social media, ranting about how you left him for a mysterious wealthy man. Lila's throat went dry. She had allowed herself a tiny breath of relief when Ethan was locked up, and now that thin comfort dissolved. Has he been spotted near the clinic or my old apartment? She asked. Not yet. But that is not our only problem. Rook hesitated, then continued. Word is circulating among rival factions. They know a civilian woman has caught Kael's attention. Names are being passed around. Her stomach dropped. She had heard Kael make passing references to enemies, but she had pushed that thought to the back of her mind. Until now, the rivals had felt like abstract trouble, something far removed from her ordinary life. Now she understood she was on their radar. Later that night, Kael knocked on her suite door. He had removed his suit jacket, sleeves rolled up to his forearms. He did not sit, remaining standing near the window. He confirmed what Rook had shared about Ethan's release, but he held back many of the grittier details about the rival families. Lila misread his silence. She assumed he was downplaying the danger because he believed she was too fragile to handle the truth, or worse, that he wanted to keep her sheltered and dependent on him. You're hiding things from me, she accused, crossing her arms. I get told bits and pieces secondhand by Rook. Am I only supposed to know whatever you decide I'm allowed to hear? Kael's expression hardened. I keep certain things from you to spare you the weight of every threat. That is not control. That is protection. Protection that leaves me blind. Lila shot back. The conversation circled without resolution. Neither could fully grasp the other's perspective. She retreated behind her locked door, convinced Kael thought of her as something to guard rather than treat as an equal point. 2 nights afterward, Lila convinced her assigned guard to let her make a quick, low-risk grocery run to a 24-hour supermarket a few blocks away. She wanted something that felt like normalcy, picking up coffee and simple snacks for her suite. She moved quickly through the aisles, keeping her head down. On the way back to the tower, as she unlocked her car door, she spotted a folded slip of paper tucked beneath her windshield wiper. It was not from Ethan. There was no angry rant about lost love. The handwriting was cold, impersonal. Kael Voss's attachments become his weaknesses. We know who you are. Eyes spread across her skin. This message came from his enemies, not her ex. They knew her face. They knew where to find her vehicle. Lila gripped the paper, her hands shaking badly. The danger was no longer only Ethan's obsession. She had become a target by association. The rift with Mia lingered. Kael held back critical information, and unseen adversaries were watching her every move. She was far more isolated than she had ever imagined. The judgment she had made about Kael's motives now felt dangerously incomplete, and the situation spiraled further out of her grasp. Lila clutched the anonymous slip of rival warning in her fist all the drive back to the high-rise. The paper crinkled under her tight grip, its short, menacing words burning in her memory. Kael's attachments become his weaknesses. We know who you are. By the time she pulled into the secured underground garage, her whole body trembled. She handed the note directly to Rook the moment she stepped out of her car. And his usual stoic face turned grim as he read it. He brought her straight up to Kael's main penthouse instead of letting her return to the guest suite. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over the glittering night skyline of Havenbrook, yet none of the distant city lights felt comforting. Kael stood by the bar, pouring himself a drink, when they walked in. Rook laid the folded paper down on the polished stone countertop without a single comment. Kael picked it up, scanned the handwriting, and his jaw set hard. This comes from the Marquez faction, he said flatly. They have been probing my operations for months. Sending you this note is their way to send me a message. Lila stared at him, frustration boiling over. That is exactly what I was talking about the other night. I only find out about your rivals when they slip threats onto my car. You filter what I get to know, and now I am their weakness. Kael did not argue the point. There was no sharp retort this time, no defense of his brand of protection. He simply leaned one hand against the counter, weariness showing faintly around his eyes. I did not anticipate they would move this fast to target someone close to me, he admitted. I underestimated how much weight they would give to a civilian connection. Before they could dive deeper into the conversation, Rook's radio crackled sharply, cutting through the heavy air of the penthouse. The bodyguard stepped away to listen, and the color drained from his face. He spun back toward Kael and Lila at once. It's Ethan. He bypassed the main garage entrance, found a service entrance. He broke through the lower level security and entered the building. A cold jolt of terror shot through Lila. She had grown so focused on Kael's shadowy rivals that she had almost forgotten her ex-boyfriend was still loose, burning with resentment. Ethan was not a trained operative, but rage made him reckless and unpredictable. He had not come with a pipe this time. He had brought a small crowbar he'd used to force open the service door. Chaos rippled through the tower. Distant alarms hummed faintly far below. Guards sprinted toward the lower hallways. Kael ordered Rook to get Lila locked inside the reinforced safe room tucked off the penthouse hallway, but before they could move far, heavy footsteps echoed in the corridor. 2 of Kael's men dragged Ethan past the doorway, his wrists secured with plastic restraints. He fought against their hold, yelling Lila's name at the top of his lungs, face red and contorted with fury. "You think hiding behind rich thugs will keep you safe?" Ethan roared as he was pulled onward. "This won't fix anything." Lila flinched back against the wall until his shouts faded down the hall. Her heart hammered wildly. Even captured, his anger felt visceral, alive in the air around her. Once Ethan was secured in a temporary holding room deep within the building. Kael had him transferred over to police custody again, this time with compiled evidence, the earlier handwritten note, the garage incident, and now the forced building entry. Still, Lila understood better than anyone that the legal system offered no true guarantee Ethan would stay locked away. Later that night, after most of the tower had fallen quiet, Lila wandered back toward the penthouse living area. She paused outside Kael's closed office door. It was slightly ajar, and voices drifted out. She did not mean to eavesdrop, but she could not help herself. She heard Kael speaking in low, sharp tones over the phone, negotiating territory, retaliation, payoffs and threats. She heard the unvarnished brutality of the world he inhabited. The parts he always kept hidden from her. Up until that moment, she had told herself Kael was merely a wealthy, powerful man who operated on the edges of legality. Now the full weight crashed down on her. This was not just influence or money. This was violence, calculated and constant. Every guard, every locked hallway, every black SUV was there because blood and betrayal were regular risks of his life. When Kael finished his call and pushed the office door open, he found Lila standing there, her face pale. She had heard everything. There was no point for him to pretend anymore. "You see it now," he said quietly. "The world I live in. It is not just Ethan you have to fear." Confusion swirled inside her mind. She had fled one abusive man, only to seek shelter with another who ruled through fear and force. Had she merely traded one kind of danger for a completely different, deadlier version? The spark of attraction that had flickered between them tangled together with dread, making every feeling messy and contradictory. She could not simply write him off as pure evil, yet she could no longer blind herself to what he did to survive. The night dragged on. Lila retreated to her guest suite, but sleep would not come. Sometime past midnight, a delivery arrived for the penthouse. A courier left a plain sealed box, no return address. Rook brought it straight to Kael, knowing it was almost certainly from the Marquez faction. Kael called Lila out of her suite to see it. He did not open it in front of her. He only showed her the exterior packaging, the faint, menacing stamp on the side. "They are making their move," Kael told her. "This is their warning. They want to prove they can reach inside this building." Lila stared at the unopened box, her throat tight. Ethan was temporarily locked away, but Kael's enemies had stepped out of the shadows. What had begun as collateral damage from her desperate kiss was now an open target painted squarely on her back. She had survived her ex's outburst tonight, yet she understood clearly, far worse was waiting ahead. The sealed box sat on the polished countertop like a ticking object. Kael ordered Rook to have it examined by his security team downstairs, refusing to risk opening it within the penthouse walls. Even after the courier took the package away for inspection, its shadow lingered over every corner of the high-rise. Lila returned to her guest suite, but she could not shake the cold, heavy realization that the tower's thick walls and armed guards might not be enough to keep her safe forever. The next morning, Lila called Mia. She needed comfort, needed to hear a voice from her old ordinary life to ground her. When her best friend picked up, Lila tried to explain everything that had unfolded: Ethan's forced entry, the Marquez faction's threatening package, the raw, brutal conversation she had overheard behind Kael's office door. She hoped for understanding, for Mia to grasp just how trapped she felt. Instead, Mia's tone grew distant and strained. "I can't keep listening to this, Lila," Mia said softly, sadness weighing down every word. "Every time we talk, there is another threat, another enemy, another close call. I'm terrified just knowing you are mixed up in all of this. If these people will target you, what is stopping them from coming after me?" Lila's chest ached. She had expected worry, not this quiet withdrawal. "You think I want any of this?" Lila replied, her voice cracking. "I had nowhere else to go. Ethan would have hunted me down relentlessly." "I know you had no good choices," Mia answered, "but I cannot keep carrying this fear. I need to step back for a while. Please understand." Before Lila could argue further, the call ended. The dial tone hummed flat and empty in her ear. Her last solid link to the civilian world had pulled away. Alone in her sunlit suite, Lila sank onto the edge of the bed. There was no going back to her old apartment, no safe place to run to where neither Ethan nor Kael's rivals could track her. Every escape route she once had was blocked off one by one. As days passed, tension between her and Kael sharpened. Kael still clung to his instinct to shield her, filtering threat reports, shielding her from the ugliest details of his feud with the Marquez family. He believed he was keeping her from unnecessary pain. To Lila, it felt like condescension, like he saw her as something fragile to lock away rather than a person who deserved the full truth to make her own decisions. They collided in a bitter argument one evening out on the rooftop terrace. Cool night wind whipped through Lila's hair, the distant glow of the city spread out far below them. "You keep making choices for me without asking," Lila said, voice raised, frustration boiling over. "You decide what dangers I get to know. You decide how much I am allowed to handle. I fled Ethan because I refused to be controlled, and now I am stuck in another version of the same dynamic." Kael's expression hardened. Lines pulled tight at the corners of his eyes. "If I lay every bloody detail of this feud in front of you, what good would that do?" He countered. "You are not trained for this world. That information will not help you fight back. It will only haunt your sleep." "Not knowing haunts me anyway," Lila shot back. "I get blindsided by notes and packages and intruders because I am kept in the dark. Protection means nothing if I cannot prepare for what might come." Their words circled, neither fully persuading the other. Beneath all the anger was tangled attraction, moments of quiet warmth that would flare up only to be smothered by fear and distrust. Kael cared for her, but his idea of care was built on power and containment. Lila craved safety, yet she would not surrender her autonomy to get it. No resolution came that night. They parted, each retreating to separate spaces inside the tower. In the quiet of her suite later, Lila faced the truth she had spent weeks avoiding. She could not rely entirely on Kael to keep her alive. If the Marquez faction struck hard, if security failed, Kael might not always be there to pull her from harm. Her safety could not depend solely on a man whose priorities were tied to a criminal war. She had to know the full scope of the threats against her, even if the truth was ugly. She thought of Rook. He saw everything. He heard every security briefing, read every threat assessment. He was loyal to Kael, but he was pragmatic. Late that night, she found him in the dim-lit hallway outside the security control room. Most of the tower slept. Only low emergency lights lit the corridor. "Can I speak with you?" Lila asked, keeping her voice low so she would not echo down the marble hall. Rook studied her for a long moment. He had always viewed her as an unplanned liability. Now he saw something new in her eyes, no longer just panic or fear, but quiet resolve. "What exactly are you asking for?" Rook said, his tone guarded. "I want unfiltered information," Lila told him firmly. "Not the edited version Kael thinks I should hear. Tell me what the Marquez faction is planning. Tell me every risk I am facing. I need to know what I am up against." Rook hesitated. Giving her that knowledge meant going against his boss's explicit wishes. But he could see she would not back down. Outside, far across the city, a car's horn blared faintly through the high-rise windows. The danger was drawing closer, and Lila was done being kept in the dark. Rook finally gave a slow, almost imperceptible nod. "Come in," he said. Stepping aside to let her into the security room, Lila stepped past him. She had lost her best friend's support, felt alienated from Kael, and had no safe place to run. But in that moment of bleak low point, her resolve solidified. She would no longer wait for other people to decide her fate. The security control room hummed with the soft drone of servers. Wall-mounted monitors cast cool blue light across Rook's sharp features, displaying live feeds from dozens of camera angles spread across the high-rise, surrounding streets and underground garage. Row after row of small screens tracked every entrance, every hallway, every blind spot the security team could cover. Lila stood beside him, her arms folded tight. Bracing herself for truths Kael had deliberately held back. Rook pulled up encrypted threat reports on one of the larger displays, keeping his voice low so it would not carry beyond the closed door. He laid out the Marquez faction's movements plainly, no softening of the facts. They had been recruiting loose contacts inside Kael's network, looking for gaps in his security. Their highest priority goal was not to kill Kael immediately. They wanted to strike through Lila. Hurting her would shatter his focus, plant chaos inside his organization, and force him into reckless missteps. "They believe you are his weakness," Rook explained, tapping lines of text across the screen. "They are waiting for a large public gathering Kael must attend next week, a charity gala downtown. It is one of the few times he leaves this tower with a reduced security detail. That is when they plan to move." A chill ran up Lila's spine. She had heard Kael mention the gala in passing, a mandatory public appearance meant to shore up his legitimate real estate investor cover. She had assumed it was nothing more than a tedious social event. Now she understood it would become a hunting ground. "Will Kael see this attack coming?" Lila asked. "He suspects they will make a play at the gala," Rook answered honestly. "But he underestimates how far they are willing to go to get to you. Since you arrived, his judgment has blurred. He's taking risks he would never have considered a few months ago. His priority has shifted from pure strategy to keeping you out of harm's way. That creates openings for Marquez." Those words landed heavy. Lila had known Kael's feelings complicated things, but she had not realized she was clouding his tactical sense. If she stayed hidden inside the tower, the Marquez would simply bide their time. If she accompanied him to the gala, she walked straight into their trap. If she stayed behind, they might still find a way to breach the building walls. No single choice felt safe. She leaned closer toward the monitors, studying maps marking the gala venue, its exits, nearby alleyways and potential sniper positions. She had no weapons, no training in underworld warfare, no army at her back. But she had paid attention over these past weeks. She had watched how security shifted, when guards rotated, which routes Kael's motorcade preferred. She knew his habits, his blind spots, the way he prioritized her safety above all else. That knowledge was her only real weapon. An idea began to form in her mind. Not some grand, risky trick, but small, deliberate adjustments to throw off the Marquez's planned strike. She would not try to defeat the faction single-handed. Instead, she would disrupt their assumptions. They operated under one core belief: Kael would lock her away inside the tower to keep her protected during the gala. What if he did the opposite? I need you to hear something, Lila said to Rook, keeping her tone steady. What if I do not stay here? What if my location becomes unpredictable? If the Marquez cannot confirm exactly where I am, they cannot time their attack perfectly around me. Rook's brows drew together. Kael will never agree to you leaving the tower in the middle of an active threat. He won't if I ask for permission, Lila replied. But I am not asking for permission. I need you to pass information to him, not as my request, but as your own security assessment. Warn him the Marquez are counting on me being trapped here. Make him see their whole plan hinges on knowing my exact location. Rook stared at her for a long stretch of silence. This stretched the limits of his loyalty. Going behind his boss's back was dangerous, yet he could not argue against the logic laid out in front of him. The Marquez built their entire gambit around predictable targets. Uncertainty would strip away their greatest advantage. Outside the control room windows, the sky paled toward faint gray dawn. Night had slipped away without Lila noticing. She left the security room before sunrise, carrying this fragile plan inside her head. She avoided running into Kael for most of that day, staying within her guest suite while Rook delivered the warning. Framing it as his independent professional analysis, Kael tracked her down late in the afternoon, stepping into her suite without knocking. The hard set of his jaw told her Rook's message had landed. He was furious, not at Rook, but at the reality that his focus on her safety had created a critical flaw in his defenses. For the first time, he could not fully control how events unfolded. His usual confidence wavered. You want to turn yourself into bait, Kael said, voice low and sharp. I want to destroy their playbook, Lila corrected, holding her ground instead of shrinking back. They expect one set of moves from you. If we give them something different, their whole plan falls apart. I am not saying I will walk straight into their line of fire, but locking me up where they assume I will be makes their job easy. Kael paced across the room. He hated the risk, hated placing her within reach of harm, yet he could not deny her reasoning. The woman he had tried so hard to shield was no longer content to sit passively and wait for others to fight her battles. She had studied the threat, weighed the odds, and chosen her own path. Before their conversation could go further, Rook sent an urgent text alert. Intelligence sources confirmed the Marquez cell had finalized their preparations for gala night. Their operatives were already moving into position around downtown. Lila glanced out the window toward the sprawling city below. The countdown to confrontation had officially begun. She held the critical piece of information that could throw everything off balance. Still, she understood clearly, even the best-laid plan could shatter in an instant. The enemy was ready to strike, and night for the high-profile event was fast approaching. Tension coiled tight inside the high-rise over the next 48 hours. Kael could not bring himself to fully accept Lila's logic, yet he could not dismiss it either. Rook continued feeding him field reports confirming Marquez operatives were scouting the gala venue, mapping entry points and watching the tower's main exits. Every new piece of intelligence reinforced Lila's core observation: the rival faction's entire strategy rested on predictable movement. If they could not pin down exactly where Lila would be on gala night, their carefully laid trap would lose most of its bite. Kael gathered his senior security team for closed-door briefings in the penthouse conference room. Lila was not invited to sit in, but she lingered nearby in the hallway, listening through the slightly ajar door. She heard them argue over every possible scenario. Some advisors insisted she must remain locked inside the reinforced safe room for the whole evening. Others warned that would play directly into Marquez's hands. After hours of debate, Kael settled on a compromise that balanced safety and chaos. Lila would leave the tower, but she would not go to the gala. Multiple decoy vehicles would roll out from the building at the exact time of the gala, creating confusion. One car would carry Lila under heavy, low-profile protection to a discreet safe house across town. Unknown to anyone outside Kael's tight inner circle, before final preparations could lock into place, news filtered in about Ethan. His court-ordered bail conditions had been violated. He'd gotten drunk and attempted to harass one of Lila's former neighbors. A judge revoked his bail and sent him back to await trial on the full charges: stalking, criminal trespass, and threats. This time there would be no quick release. The long shadow of her abusive ex was finally lifted from her daily life. Still, Lila barely let herself feel relief. Ethan was off the board, but the far deadlier Marquez threat loomed larger than ever. She worked up the courage to call Mia. It was a nervous, shaky call. Lila did not share operational details about the coming gala confrontation. She only told Mia that Ethan was behind bars and that she was trying to take charge of her own life. There was hesitation on the other end of the line. Mia was still frightened of being targeted by association, but she missed her friend deeply. They agreed on cautious terms, no in-person visits for now, but they could talk briefly over encrypted messages. The old easy closeness would not return overnight, but the complete break between them was mended. Rook watched Lila through all of this with new eyes. Where he had once seen only a panicked civilian swept into a world she did not belong in, he now saw sharp-minded resolve. He still worried her presence put the whole organization at risk, yet he respected how hard she fought for her own agency. He stopped pushing for her permanent removal from the tower and began including her in high-level threat summaries whenever Kael was not present. Late one evening, Kael found Lila out on the rooftop terrace. A cold wind whipped across the concrete surface. The city stretched out beneath them, thousands of glowing windows dotting the dark expanse. He stepped beside her, leaning his forearms against the safety railing. You knew Ethan's removal would not fix everything, Kael said quietly. I did, Lila answered, staring out over the skyline. He was my personal nightmare. The Marquez are yours. But I had become tangled up in that fight regardless. Kael's gaze settled on her face. Months earlier he had spoken about keeping her safe as a promise. Now he understood safety could never mean locking her away from every hard truth. The romantic pull between them had not faded, but it was wrapped in risk, sacrifice, and the weight of everything they stood to lose. The Marquez hold one final card, Kael admitted. They have a contact planted inside my security staff. We do not know exactly who it is. That is why decoy movements and secret safehouse locations are our only real defense. The mole cannot leak information they never receive. Lila's stomach turned. A traitor within their own ranks meant none of their plans could be treated as foolproof. Any detail shared too widely could wind up straight in Marquez's hands. That explained why Kael refused to tell even most of his own men where she would spend gala night. Only Kael and Rook would know the safehouse address. The day of the charity gala arrived. After sunset, downtown Havenbrook glittered. Luxury vehicles began pulling up to the venue's grand entrance. Reporters and socialites lined the sidewalk outside. Inside, ballrooms glittered with chandeliers, fine food, and music, all a shiny public mask for the coming underworld showdown. Down in the tower's underground garage, engines rumbled to life. 3 identical black SUVs lined up, ready to depart at staggered intervals. One would carry Kael toward the gala. The other 2 would drive false routes to throw watchers off. Separately, an unmarked gray sedan sat parked in a shadowed corner of the garage, waiting for Lila. No logos, no tinted windows so dark they drew attention. It looked like any ordinary midsize car on city streets. Lila slung a small bag over her shoulder. Her hands were steady, though her pulse raced. This was the moment everything shifted. The Marquez faction expected a predictable play. Tonight their assumptions would be shattered. The trap they had built was set to spring, but they could no longer be certain who would walk into it. Kael rested one hand lightly on her upper arm before she climbed into the gray sedan. There was no grand declaration, only raw honesty. Stay alert, he said. Trust no one except the 2 men driving you. If anything feels wrong, do not hesitate to run. Lila nodded. She climbed inside, and the car door closed with a soft, heavy thud. Outside the garage bays rolled upward. Multiple vehicles pulled out onto the city streets at once. The long-awaited night of reckoning had begun, and there was no turning back from the final confrontation ahead. Downtown Havenbrook hummed with gala night energy. Bright flashbulbs popped along the curb, socialites laughed beneath glowing marquees, and live jazz spilled out through the venue's glass double doors. Kael's black SUV pulled up to the main entrance, and he stepped out into the crowd, calm and collected for the public eye. Reporters called his name. Cameras turned toward him. To everyone watching, he was merely the wealthy real estate investor attending a high-profile charity function. Few guessed that every smile, every casual gesture, masked tight, coiled tension. Inside the grand ballroom, crystal chandeliers cast warm light across polished floors. Kael moved through groups of guests, shaking hands and making polite small talk, all while his security detail fanned out quietly, scanning every corner for unfamiliar faces. Rook stayed close at his shoulder, radio tucked discreetly inside his suit jacket, receiving constant updates from men posted around the building and across the city. Back in the unmarked gray sedan, Lila rode toward the safe house across town, her driver weaving through busy evening traffic, avoiding main thoroughfares to shake any possible tails, but the Marquez faction had already adapted. Their mole within Kael's security circle had not uncovered Lila's exact destination, yet he had passed along word of the decoy vehicles. The rival leadership realized their original trap, designed to ambush Lila alongside Kael at the gala, would never work. They shifted their plan. They would strike Kael inside the ballroom instead. Chaos inside the crowded venue would draw every available guard away from the tower and from Lila's protective detail. Once Kael's men were distracted, another team would hunt Lila down. Rook picked up fragments of this revised plot through a panicked tip from a confidential informant mid-gala. He leaned in beside Kael's ear amid the chatter of guests, voice lowered to barely above a breath. They've changed their objective. They're going to create a disturbance here to pull resources. A second unit is mobilizing to go after Lila. Kael's expression did not shift outward, but his knuckles whitened around the stem of the wine glass he held. His first instinct was to abandon the gala entirely, to race across the city to get to Lila. That was exactly what Marquez wanted, to make him act out of fear instead of strategy. He forced himself to hold his position inside the ballroom. Alert her drivers, Kael said to Rook. Tell them to deviate from the safe house route immediately. Keep moving, no fixed stops. The warning went out over encrypted radio. Inside the gray sedan, Lila's phone buzzed with the urgent coded message. Her heart lurched. The safe house was no longer a refuge. They could not drive straight there, could not seek shelter in any pre-planned location. Her two drivers exchanged sharp glances, then peeled away from their original path, merging onto a busy multi-lane highway, constantly switching lanes to make themselves harder to follow. Minutes later, chaos exploded inside the gala venue. A loud crash echoed from the lobby. Fire alarms blared, sharp and shrill. Panic rippled through the hundreds of party guests. People shouted, chairs scraped across marble flooring. Smoke billowed from a small, deliberately set fire near the main entryway. Most of Kael's outer security rushed toward the disturbance, just as the Marquez had calculated. Armed Marquez operatives slipped into the ballroom through a side service entrance amid the confusion. Their faces partially hidden behind fabric masks, Kael and Rook were cornered near a wide floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the city. A short, brutal confrontation erupted. Gunshots cracked, muffled by thick stone walls and the screams of fleeing guests. Kael fought alongside Rook, driven by cold, unyielding resolve, yet they were outnumbered. Across town, Lila's sedan raced through dark city streets. She could hear sirens wailing in the distance, ringing out from the gala direction. Her drivers spotted a dark pickup truck following them, clinging tight to their rear bumper. They could not outrun it forever. Lila knew if they were caught, death would be quick. She could no longer simply sit in the back seat, passive while others fought for her life. Pull over at the next busy gas station, she told the driver. Both men shot her a shocked look. That's exposing you. It's better than being cornered on a dark back road, Lila insisted. Lots of witnesses, bright lights, people everywhere. They won't risk an open shootout in public view. Reluctantly the driver obeyed. They pulled into the brightly lit gas station lot, full of late-night travelers. The pursuing pickup slowed, circling once, then hung back, unwilling to attack in plain sight of cameras and civilian bystanders. Lila grabbed her small bag, stepped out of the car, and walked straight toward the station's main building, keeping crowds of strangers between herself and the men hunting her. She dialed 911, reporting the vehicle stalking her, giving dispatch the pickup's license plate and exact location. Simultaneously she sent a quick encrypted text to Rook, telling him exactly where she was. Back at the gala, the fight was turning. Additional loyal Kael security had raced back from the lobby, surrounding and disarming most of the Marquez operatives. The ringleader of the attack was captured alive. Sirens screamed as city police poured into the venue. The main battle inside the ballroom was over, but Kael did not pause to process victory. Rook showed him Lila's incoming text. Without another word, Kael pushed through the crowd of responding officers and fled the gala, heading straight for the gas station location. When he arrived, flashing police lights painted the gas station pavement in streaks of red and blue. The suspicious pickup truck was already blocked by 2 patrol cars. Its occupants were being placed in handcuffs. Lila stood on the concrete, safe but shaken, speaking to a uniformed officer. Her hands trembled slightly, yet she held her posture steady. She had not waited to be rescued. She had fought to keep herself alive. Kael crossed the lot toward her. The noise of police radios and gas station pumps hummed all around them. When their eyes met, all the pretense of hard, calculated distance crumbled away. This night had exacted a heavy cost, multiple men wounded, public chaos, evidence that would draw unwanted law enforcement scrutiny onto Kael's organization. The Marquez faction's fighting force had been broken, but scars remained. The main conflict was decisively finished, yet neither of them walked away unmarked by violence and fear. Lila looked past Kael for a moment toward the street, watching the police load the last of the captured operatives into the back of a squad car. The threat chasing them for months was finally collapsing. Still, she understood, surviving the fight was only half of everything they would have to face. The glow of police emergency lights faded slowly from the gas station asphalt as units began clearing the scene. Handcuffed Marquez operatives were loaded into patrol vehicles, and witness statements wrapped up under the harsh glare of overhead station lamps. Kael stood beside Lila, keeping a quiet, watchful space instead of pulling her into a tight, dramatic embrace. The night's violence hung heavy in the cool autumn air. Victory tasted sharp, mixed with exhaustion and unspoken cost. They rode back toward the downtown high-rise in silence inside one of Kael's unmarked vehicles. Sirens still wailed far off in the distance, echoes of the gala chaos rippling through Havenbrook. When they stepped through the tower's marble lobby, Rook met them with a stack of updates. The Marquez faction's leadership was either in custody or on the run. The mole embedded within Kael's security team had been identified and detained. The immediate, mortal threat that had loomed over Lila for months was gone. But peace would not arrive clean-cut. Law enforcement was digging into the gala shooting, asking questions about Kael's business ties, tracing every thread of that night's public bloodshed. In the days that followed, Lila stepped back to process everything. She returned to her small guest suite, but the tower no longer felt like a temporary safe haven. It carried too many memories of fear, surveillance, and the tangled power dynamic that had defined their early bond. Ethan waited in jail for his upcoming trial, where the mountain of evidence against him would ensure he could never stalk her again. That chapter of terror was fully closed. Mia reconnected more fully, their encrypted messages growing longer, until they agreed to meet for coffee in a crowded, well-lit public spot, cautious, but rebuilding their friendship one quiet conversation at a time. Kael gave her room to breathe. He did not press her for answers about their future. He knew better than to demand she choose him after everything she had endured. Still, they crossed paths often, in the penthouse kitchen at dawn, out on the windswept rooftop after dark. Their attraction had survived bullets and betrayal, yet both understood a simple fairy tale happy ending was impossible. Kael could not erase his criminal past overnight. He could not simply walk away from the organization he had spent decades building, even with the Marquez threat destroyed. Lila could not forget that she had once traded one form of control for another. No matter how genuine his care for her had become. One crisp evening several weeks after the gala showdown, Lila suggested they drive back to the bistro sidewalk where it all began. The same restaurant glowed with warm patio light, wine glasses clinking out onto the street, autumn wind stirring the fallen leaves across the concrete. They parked several blocks away and walked the rest of the distance on foot. Lila stopped exactly where she had grabbed and kissed Kael that desperate night. She stared at the spot, remembering the cold grip of panic in her chest, the split-second choice that had blown apart her ordinary life. So much started right here, Lila said softly. I only wanted to escape Ethan for 30 seconds. I never imagined where that single kiss would lead. Kael stood beside her, hands tucked inside his coat pockets, gazing out over the passing pedestrians. I offered you protection that night, he replied. Back then I thought protection meant locking danger away from you. I was wrong. Safety is not something one person can hand another. She nodded. That hard lesson had been carved into her through every threat, every argument, every moment she had fought to hold on to her own autonomy. She was no longer the terrified woman who had acted purely out of flight. She knew her own strength now, and she knew the risks of choosing to stay near Kael. They did not make grand promises under the street lamp. There was no proposal, no sweeping declaration that all hardship was over. Instead they spoke plainly. Lila told him she could not move permanently into the penthouse. She planned to rent a new, secure apartment in a different neighborhood of the city, far from her old one. She would keep her position at the medical clinic, keep building her separate, independent life. If they were to have any kind of relationship, it would happen on equal footing. She would retain her own space, her own choices, her own world. Kael would need to continue untangling himself from the worst parts of his organization, stepping back from violent underworld dealings as much as he could manage. There were no guarantees. The road ahead would still hold complications, public scrutiny, lingering shadows from his past. I am not asking for perfection, Lila told him. I am asking for balance. I will not become someone's sheltered prize ever again. Kael understood. He accepted those terms without argument. Months rolled forward. Lila moved into her new apartment, bright and quiet, fitted with reinforced locks and discreet security arranged by Rook, though guards no longer lingered in her hallways. She went to work each morning, laughed over coffee with Mia, built back pieces of the normalcy she had fought so hard to preserve. She saw Kael several evenings each week, sometimes at her place, sometimes for quiet dinners away from the high-rise. Their romance remained passionate, but grounded in hard-won respect. Old wounds did not vanish completely. Nightmares still woke her some nights. She carried scars from Ethan's abuse and from the Marquez's vendetta. But she was no longer running. One late night, she stood at her apartment window watching city traffic flow far below. Her phone lit up with a short text from Kael, who had just left her building. Whatever comes, you get to choose your own path. Outside, car doors clicked shut in the distance. Somewhere a dog barked down the street. No bodyguards loitered outside her walls. No anonymous threats waited under her door. The desperate kiss on that autumn sidewalk had pulled her into a dark, dangerous world, yet it had also forced her to discover the courage inside herself she never knew she possessed. Her life was not without risk, but for the first time in years, the choices were entirely hers to make.